Emma and Jake had been dreaming of their own place for years. After endless apartment living and saving every penny, they finally stumbled upon the perfect house, or so they thought. Nestled on the edge of a dense, dark forest, the old Victorian-style home seemed like something out of a fairy tale. It was far from the hustle and bustle of the city, offering peace and a fresh start. The house had been on the market for a while, which should have raised some red flags. But the couple was too enchanted by its charm and the ridiculously low price. They imagined cozy nights by the fireplace, long walks in the nearby woods, and perhaps even starting a family. "Can you believe this place?" Emma beamed as she twirled in the spacious living room, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "It's like a dream come true." Jake smiled, though a slight unease crept into his mind. "It's definitely something," he agreed, admiring the intricate woodwork and vintage fixtures. "I still can't believe we got it for such a good price." Their excitement overshadowed the creaks and groans of the old house as they moved in. The first few days were spent unpacking and exploring every nook and cranny. Emma loved the antique furniture left behind by the previous owners, while Jake marveled at the craftsmanship of the house itself. They felt a sense of history, a connection to the past. On their first night, after a long day of settling in, they decided to celebrate with a bottle of wine on the porch. The sun set behind the trees, casting long shadows across the yard. "To our new home," Jake toasted, clinking his glass against Emma's. "To new beginnings," she replied, her eyes sparkling with joy. As darkness fell, a chilly breeze swept through the trees, making the couple shiver. They went inside, laughing at their overactive imaginations when the wind howled like a distant wolf. That night, as they lay in bed, Emma thought she heard soft whispers. She brushed it off as the house settling or the wind outside. Jake, too, felt a strange sensation, as if someone was watching them, but he dismissed it quickly, attributing it to the new environment. In the days that followed, they continued to notice odd things: a cold spot in the hallway, a shadow moving just out of sight, the unsettling feeling of being watched. But they always found logical explanations, drafts, reflections, and their own imaginations running wild. The town folks, when they visited the local store, often gave them knowing looks. Some offered cryptic warnings about the house's history, but Emma and Jake laughed them off as superstitions of a small, isolated community. It wasn't until a week later that Emma found an old, dusty photo album hidden in the attic. The photographs were old, black and white, and depicted previous residents of the house. The last photo, however, sent chills down her spine. It showed a family, smiling brightly, but in the background, a shadowy figure loomed, almost invisible but unmistakably there. As Emma closed the album, a sense of dread washed over her. She couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She hoped it was just her imagination, but deep down, she knew their new home held secrets, dark, terrifying secrets that were waiting to be uncovered. The days turned into weeks, and Emma and Jake began to settle into their new life. They decorated the house, filling it with their personal touches: bright curtains, cozy rugs, and a myriad of framed photos that told the story of their life together. Despite the house's age and its creaks and groans, it began to feel like home. However, the unsettling occurrences persisted. One evening, as Emma was cooking dinner, she felt a sudden chill. The temperature dropped so drastically that she could see her breath in the air. She checked the thermostat, but it read a comfortable 72 degrees. She brushed it off and continued cooking, but the feeling of being watched never left her. Jake had his own experiences. While working in his home office, he often caught movement out of the corner of his eye. He would look up, only to find nothing there. One night, he heard footsteps coming from the attic. Grabbing a flashlight, he climbed the creaky stairs, expecting to find a raccoon or some other animal. But the attic was empty, save for the old furniture and the photo album Emma had found. He shivered, not just from the cold, but from a growing sense of unease. The couple tried to maintain a sense of normalcy. They invited friends over for a housewarming party, hoping that the laughter and company would chase away the strange feelings. The party was a success, filled with music, food, and joy. But even with the house full of people, Emma couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was as if the unseen presence resented the intrusion. One night, as they were watching a movie in the living room, the television suddenly turned off. The room plunged into darkness, except for the flickering light from the fireplace. Jake tried to turn the TV back on, but it refused to respond. Frustrated, he checked the power cord and found it still plugged in. "Maybe it's a power surge," he muttered. Emma nodded, but she felt a cold sweat break out on her forehead. She glanced at the windows, half expecting to see a face staring back at her from the darkness. But there was nothing there, only the inky blackness of the forest. As the days passed, the strange occurrences became more frequent. Doors would slam shut on their own, lights would flicker, and they would hear whispers in the dead of night. Emma started having nightmares, vivid, terrifying dreams where she was trapped in the house, unable to escape from an unseen force. She would wake up in a cold sweat, her heart racing. Jake, too, was affected. He began to have trouble sleeping, often staying up late into the night, staring at the shadows that seemed to move on their own. He found himself growing irritable, snapping at Emma for no reason. The tension between them grew, fueled by the relentless sense of being watched. One evening, as Emma was cleaning the living room, she noticed something strange. A fine layer of dust covered the furniture, even though she had just cleaned the day before. She wiped it away, but the next day, the dust was back. It was as if the house itself was decaying, no matter how hard she tried to keep it clean. Desperate for answers, Emma decided to delve deeper into the house's history. She visited the local library and scoured old newspapers, searching for any mention of their home. What she found was disturbing. The house had a long history of tragedy and misfortune. Previous owners had reported strange occurrences, and several had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. She brought her findings to Jake, who listened with growing concern. They realized that they were not imagining things, something malevolent was in their home. They decided to reach out to a local historian, Mrs. Caldwell, who had lived in the town her entire life. Mrs. Caldwell was an elderly woman with a wealth of knowledge about the town and its dark past. When Emma and Jake visited her, she welcomed them into her cozy home, offering tea and biscuits. As they sat in her parlor, Emma recounted the strange events they had experienced. Mrs. Caldwell listened intently, her expression growing graver by the minute. When Emma finished, the old woman took a deep breath and began to speak. "That house you live in has always been a place of darkness," she said. "It's known as the Thornfield House. Many families have lived there, and many have left in fear, or worse, disappeared. They say the house is cursed, haunted by a presence known as the unseen watcher. No one knows exactly what it is, but it feeds on fear and despair." Emma and Jake exchanged worried glances. "What can we do?" Jake asked. "We can't just leave, this is our home." Mrs. Caldwell shook her head. "Leaving might not help. The watcher is bound to the house, but its influence can reach beyond its walls. You must find a way to confront it, to understand what it wants. Only then can you hope to rid yourselves of its presence." As they left Mrs. Caldwell's house, Emma felt a mixture of fear and determination. They had a name for their tormentor now, the unseen watcher. And they had a mission, to uncover the secrets of Thornfield House and find a way to free themselves from its malevolent grip. Little did they know, their journey into the darkness had only just begun. The unseen watcher was always there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The next few days passed in a blur of restless sleep and growing paranoia. Emma and Jake could no longer ignore the mounting evidence of a haunting. The house, once their dream home, had turned into a nightmare. Determined to understand and confront the unseen watcher, they began documenting every strange occurrence, hoping to find a pattern or clue that could lead them to a solution. One night, as they were reviewing their notes, they heard a loud crash from the kitchen. Heart pounding, Jake grabbed a flashlight and cautiously made his way downstairs, Emma close behind him. They found the kitchen in disarray, cabinets open, dishes shattered on the floor, and an eerie chill in the air. "It's getting worse," Emma whispered, her voice trembling. "What do we do, Jake? We can't live like this." Jake clenched his fists, his frustration and fear evident. "We need to find out what it wants. Maybe there's something in the house that can help us understand." Driven by desperation, they decided to explore the attic again. Armed with flashlights and a newfound determination, they climbed the narrow stairs to the dusty, dimly lit space. The attic was filled with old furniture, trunks, and cobwebs. It had an oppressive atmosphere, as if the air itself was charged with malevolence. Emma's flashlight beam swept across the room, landing on the old photo album she had found earlier. She picked it up and began flipping through the pages, her heart racing as she revisited the eerie photographs. Suddenly, a loose page fell out, revealing a hidden compartment in the back cover. Inside, they found a small, leather-bound diary. Jake opened the diary, his fingers trembling. The entries were written in a neat, cursive script, detailing the experiences of a previous resident named Margaret. As they read, the horror of Margaret's story unfolded before them. Margaret had moved into the house with her husband and young daughter, unaware of the dark presence that lurked within. Her diary chronicled the escalating hauntings, objects moving on their own, cold spots, and the feeling of being watched. She wrote about her growing fear and despair, and how the watcher seemed to feed on it. The final entries were the most disturbing. Margaret described hearing whispers at night, urging her to do terrible things. She wrote about seeing dark figures in the mirrors and feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. Her last entry was barely legible, the handwriting shaky and desperate. "The watcher is getting stronger. It wants us gone. I can feel it watching me, always watching. I don't know how much longer we can hold on. If you find this diary, please, help us." Emma closed the diary, her hands shaking. Margaret and her family never left, did they? Jake's face was pale. No. They disappeared without a trace. Just like the others. The realization hit them like a cold wave. They were not the first to be tormented by the unseen watcher, and they might not be the last. They needed to find a way to end the haunting before it consumed them as well. That night, the haunting reached a new level of intensity. Emma and Jake were jolted awake by a loud, guttural growl echoing through the house. The walls seemed to vibrate with a malevolent energy. They stumbled out of bed, disoriented and terrified. As they moved through the house, they saw dark, shadowy figures flickering at the edges of their vision. Whispers filled the air, growing louder and more insistent. The unseen watcher was making its presence known, and it was clear that it was angry. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. Emma grabbed Jake's hand, her grip tight with fear. "We need to get out of here," she said, her voice barely audible over the cacophony of whispers. They fumbled their way to the front door, only to find it locked and immovable. Panic set in as they tried to open windows, but they too were sealed shut. It was as if the house itself was trapping them, refusing to let them escape. In the midst of their frantic attempts to flee, they heard a soft, mocking laughter. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The unseen watcher was toying with them, enjoying their terror. Desperate and out of options, Jake remembered the hidden room in the basement filled with dark, occult artifacts. "Maybe there's something down there that can help us," he said, his voice shaking. Emma nodded, and together they made their way to the basement. The air grew colder and heavier as they descended the stairs, and the whispers grew louder, more sinister. The basement was pitch black, their flashlights barely penetrating the thick darkness. They found the hidden room, its door slightly ajar. Inside, the air was suffused with a palpable sense of dread. The room was filled with strange symbols, ancient books, and bizarre objects that seemed to hum with dark energy. Emma's eyes landed on a large, ornate mirror at the center of the room. As she approached it, she felt an overwhelming urge to look into it. Despite her fear, she couldn't resist. When she peered into the mirror, she saw not her reflection, but the twisted, malevolent face of the unseen watcher. The sight was so horrifying that she stumbled back, nearly dropping her flashlight. "Jake, the mirror. It's in the mirror." Jake grabbed an old book from a nearby shelf, flipping through its pages in a desperate search for answers. He found a passage about binding and banishing spirits, written in an ancient language. With no other options, he began to read the incantation aloud. As he spoke the words, the room seemed to pulse with energy. The whispers grew louder, then suddenly stopped. The air became still, almost suffocating. Emma watched in terror as the figure in the mirror began to writhe and twist, its face contorted in rage. Jake continued the incantation, his voice growing stronger. The watcher screeched, a sound so piercing that it felt like needles in their ears. The dark energy in the room intensified, and for a moment, it seemed as if the walls themselves would collapse. With a final, guttural cry, the unseen watcher vanished from the mirror. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a deafening silence. Emma and Jake stood there, panting and trembling, unsure if they had truly succeeded. "We did it," Jake said, his voice hoarse. "I think we actually did it." But as they left the basement and returned to the main part of the house, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching them. The house was eerily quiet, too quiet. It was as if the watcher had retreated, but was still lurking, waiting for another opportunity to strike. Over the next few days, they remained on edge, expecting the haunting to resume at any moment. They slept in shifts, keeping watch for any sign of the entity's return. But the days passed without incident, and gradually, they began to believe that they had banished the watcher for good. Emma threw herself into making the house feel like home again, determined to erase the memories of their ordeal. She scrubbed every surface, replaced broken items, and filled the rooms with light and warmth. Jake focused on securing the house, installing new locks and reinforcing the windows. Despite their efforts, the sense of unease never fully left them. They knew that the house had a dark history, and that the unseen watcher was just one part of it. There were still unanswered questions, still shadows lurking in the corners of their minds. One evening, as they sat on the porch, watching the sun set behind the trees, Emma turned to Jake. "Do you think it's really over?" she asked, her voice tinged with doubt. Jake sighed, wrapping an arm around her. "I hope so. But I think we need to be prepared, just in case." Emma nodded, knowing that he was right. The unseen watcher might have been banished, but the house still held secrets, and they needed to be ready for whatever came next. As the darkness fell and the first stars appeared in the sky, they sat in silence, listening to the sounds of the night. For the first time in weeks, the forest seemed peaceful, the air filled with the gentle rustling of leaves and the distant call of an owl. But deep down, they knew that the unseen watcher was still out there, waiting and watching. And they would have to stay vigilant, always ready to face the darkness that lingered just beyond the edge of the light. The brief respite from the haunting brought a false sense of security. Emma and Jake tried to resume their normal lives, but the tension lingered. They couldn't shake the feeling that the unseen watcher was still present, lurking just out of sight. One morning, Emma was making breakfast when she noticed something strange on the kitchen floor. A series of small, wet footprints led from the back door to the living room. She followed them, her heart pounding, but they disappeared as abruptly as they had begun. She checked the doors and windows, but they were all locked. She called Jake, who was in his office upstairs. "Jake, you need to see this." Jake hurried down, his face pale. "What is it?" Emma pointed to the footprints. "They just appeared." "I can't explain it." Jake examined the footprints, his brow furrowed. "It looks like a child's footprints." "But how? No one else is here." Their unease grew as more inexplicable events unfolded. Objects would vanish and reappear in strange places, eerie whispers would echo through the halls, and they would wake up to find cryptic messages scrawled on the walls in a language they couldn't understand. Determined to get to the bottom of these occurrences, they decided to delve deeper into the history of Thornfield House. They spent hours in the local library, poring over old records and newspapers. What they discovered was a chilling tale of tragedy and darkness. The house had been built in the late 1800s by a wealthy family, the Thornfields. The patriarch, Jonathan Thornfield, was known for his interest in the occult and the supernatural. He had constructed the house with hidden rooms and secret passages, intending it to be a sanctuary for his experiments. Jonathan's obsession grew, and he began performing dark rituals, believing he could contact otherworldly entities. According to the records, his wife and children mysteriously disappeared, and Jonathan was found dead in the attic, surrounded by strange symbols and burnt-out candles. The house had been abandoned for years before being sold, and subsequent owners had all reported strange occurrences and vanished without a trace. Emma and Jake were horrified but not entirely surprised. The pieces were falling into place. The unseen watcher was likely the result of Jonathan Thornfield's dark experiments, a malevolent entity bound to the house. That night, Emma had another vivid nightmare. She found herself wandering through the house, its rooms twisted and distorted. The walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own, and she could hear faint cries and whispers. She reached the attic, where a dark figure loomed, its eyes glowing with malevolence. She woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. Jake held her, trying to comfort her. "We're going to get through this, Emma. We have to." They decided to contact a paranormal investigator, hoping to find a way to rid the house of the watcher. They found a well-known investigator, Dr. Richard Hayes, who had experience dealing with malevolent entities. Dr. Hayes arrived the next day, bringing with him an array of equipment. He was a tall, imposing man with a calm demeanor that reassured Emma and Jake. He set up cameras and sensors throughout the house, intending to capture any paranormal activity. As night fell, Dr. Hayes conducted a séance in the living room. He called out to the unseen watcher, asking it to reveal itself. The air grew cold, and the room was filled with an oppressive silence. Suddenly, the candles flickered, and a low, guttural growl echoed through the house. Dr. Hayes remained calm. "If you are here, give us a sign." The room darkened, and the shadows seemed to come alive, writhing and twisting. The growl grew louder, almost deafening. Emma clung to Jake, her heart racing. "Dr. Hayes continued, his voice steady. "Why are you here? What do you want?" A chilling whisper filled the room, incomprehensible at first. But then it became clear: fear. "I feed on fear." Emma and Jake exchanged horrified glances. The unseen watcher thrived on their terror. The more afraid they were, the stronger it became. Dr. Hayes took a deep breath. "We need to find the source of its power. Something is anchoring it to this house." They decided to search the attic again, where Jonathan Thornfield had died. The air was thick with dread as they climbed the stairs. The attic was just as they remembered it, filled with old furniture and covered in dust. But this time, they noticed a trapdoor in the floor, hidden under a pile of debris. They cleared the debris and opened the trapdoor, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. With flashlights in hand, they descended into a hidden chamber. The walls were covered in strange symbols, and the air was thick with the stench of decay. In the center of the room was a large, ornate mirror, the same one Emma had seen in her vision. Dr. Hayes examined it closely. "This mirror is a portal, a gateway to the other side. It's the source of the entity's power." He instructed Emma and Jake to gather all the occult artifacts they could find and bring them to the chamber. They spent hours scouring the house, finding strange objects hidden in the walls and floorboards. Each item seemed to pulse with dark energy, and they could feel the watcher's presence growing stronger. Once they had collected everything, Dr. Hayes performed a ritual to sever the entity's connection to the house. He chanted ancient incantations, and the symbols on the walls began to glow. The air grew thick with a malevolent energy, and the watcher manifested in the mirror, its form twisted and grotesque. Emma and Jake watched in horror as the entity writhed and screeched, trying to break free. Dr. Hayes continued the ritual, his voice unwavering. By the power of light and the strength of will, I banish you from this place. You have no hold here. The entity let out a final, deafening scream, and the mirror shattered into 1,000 pieces. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the room fell silent. Emma and Jake felt an overwhelming sense of relief, as if a great weight had been lifted from their shoulders. Dr. Hayes turned to them, his face etched with exhaustion. It's done. The Watcher is gone. Emma and Jake hugged each other, tears of relief streaming down their faces. They thanked Dr. Hayes profusely, grateful for his help. He advised them to cleanse the house and remove any remaining traces of dark energy. Over the next few days, they followed Dr. Hayes' instructions, burning sage and reciting prayers in every room. The house felt lighter, almost as if it had been freed from a great burden. The strange occurrences ceased, and for the first time in months, they slept peacefully. As they settled back into their lives, Emma and Jake couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of unease. They had banished the unseen watcher, but the house's dark history still cast a shadow over their happiness. One evening, as they were unpacking boxes in the attic, Emma found an old, tattered journal hidden in the floorboards. It belonged to Jonathan Thornfield, detailing his descent into madness and his attempts to contact otherworldly entities. As she read through the journal, she felt a chill run down her spine. Jonathan had described the Watcher in great detail, but he had also mentioned other entities, darker and more powerful. He had warned that the Watcher was just the beginning, a harbinger of something far worse. Emma showed the journal to Jake, her hands shaking. What if there's more? What if the Watcher was just the start? Jake's face grew serious. Then we need to be prepared. We can't let our guard down. They decided to keep the journal and continue researching the house's history. They reached out to Dr. Hayes, who agreed to help them if any new threats emerged. As the days turned into weeks, Emma and Jake slowly rebuilt their lives. They decorated the house, filling it with light and warmth, determined to create a safe haven. They planted a garden in the backyard, finding solace in the simple act of nurturing life. Despite their efforts, they remained vigilant, always aware that the house held secrets yet to be uncovered. They knew that they had faced and defeated the unseen Watcher, but they also knew that the darkness that had plagued Thornfield House was ancient and deep-rooted. One night, as they sat on the porch, watching the stars, Emma turned to Jake. Do you think we'll ever be truly safe here? Jake took her hand, squeezing it gently. I don't know. But I do know that we're stronger together. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. Emma nodded, finding comfort in his words. They had faced their deepest fears and emerged victorious. They had banished the unseen Watcher, but their journey was far from over. As they sat in the quiet of the night, the house stood silent and still, its dark history hidden behind the walls. The unseen Watcher was gone, but the echoes of the past lingered, a reminder that some evils could never be fully vanquished. And so, Emma and Jake remained ever watchful, their bond stronger than ever, ready to face whatever darkness the future might hold. In the weeks following the banishment of the unseen Watcher, Emma and Jake tried to reclaim a sense of normalcy. The house seemed lighter, almost peaceful, but the shadows of its past lingered in their minds. They continued to investigate Jonathan Thornfield's journal, hoping to uncover any remaining threats. The warnings about other entities haunted them, fueling a sense of unease that they couldn't shake. Their fears were validated one evening when Emma was alone in the house. Jake had gone into town to run errands, leaving Emma to finish unpacking boxes in the attic. As she sorted through old books and trinkets, she heard a faint, rhythmic tapping coming from the walls. She paused, listening intently. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, as if something, or someone, was trying to communicate with her. Jake? She called out, even though she knew he wasn't there. The house responded with silence, save for the persistent tapping. Heart pounding, Emma followed the sound, which led her to the hidden chamber they had discovered weeks earlier. The air grew colder as she descended the stairs, and the sense of dread that had lifted after the Watcher's banishment returned with full force. She reached the bottom and found the chamber empty, but the tapping continued, now echoing from the walls themselves. As she stood in the center of the room, trying to pinpoint the source of the noise, she noticed a faint glow emanating from a crack in the floor. She knelt down, prying at the boards until they gave way, revealing a small, hidden compartment. Inside was an old, leather-bound book covered in strange symbols. Emma's fingers trembled as she opened the book. The pages were filled with arcane writings and dark rituals, similar to the ones in Jonathan's journal but more detailed, more sinister. One passage, in particular, caught her eye. It spoke of a powerful entity, far more dangerous than the Watcher, that had been sealed within the house. "The Devourer of Souls," she whispered, her voice barely audible. According to the book, the Devourer was an ancient being that fed on the life force of the living, drawing strength from their fear and despair. Jonathan Thornfield had attempted to summon and control it but had ultimately failed, leading to his death and the disappearance of his family. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. The Watcher had been a mere servant, a harbinger of the true darkness that resided within Thornfield House. She knew she had to tell Jake immediately. When Jake returned, Emma showed him the book and recounted her experience. His face grew pale as he read the passages, his eyes widening in horror. "We thought we were done with this," he said, his voice shaking. "But it looks like the real threat has been here all along." They contacted Dr. Hayes, who agreed to return to help them. He arrived the next day, his expression grim as he examined the book. "This is far worse than I anticipated," he admitted. "The Devourer is a powerful entity, and if it has been lying dormant, our actions may have stirred it." Emma and Jake felt a growing sense of dread as Dr. Hayes explained the severity of their situation. The Devourer was drawn to fear, feeding on it to gain strength. If it fully awakened, it could consume them entirely. Dr. Hayes suggested a multifaceted approach, reinforcing the protective barriers around the house, performing a cleansing ritual, and preparing for a final confrontation with the entity. The process would be arduous and dangerous, but it was their only hope. They began by reinforcing the protective barriers. Dr. Hayes placed wards and symbols throughout the house, creating a network of defenses to keep the Devourer at bay. Emma and Jake helped, carving symbols into the door frames and windowsills, and hanging protective charms in every room. Next, they performed a cleansing ritual. Dr. Hayes led them in chanting ancient incantations, burning sage and other herbs to purify the house. As they moved from room to room, they felt the oppressive atmosphere lift slightly, but the sense of impending doom remained. The final step was the most dangerous. Dr. Hayes explained that they would need to confront the Devourer directly, using a combination of rituals and protective spells to weaken it. The entity would likely resist, and they had to be prepared for a fierce battle. As night fell, they gathered in the hidden chamber. The air was thick with tension, and the sense of foreboding was almost tangible. Dr. Hayes drew a protective circle on the floor, instructing Emma and Jake to stand within it. He then began the ritual, chanting in a low, resonant voice that echoed through the chamber. The temperature dropped sharply, and the room grew dark as the candles flickered and dimmed. The tapping sound returned, louder and more insistent, as if the very walls were coming to life. Emma and Jake held hands, their fear mounting with each passing second. Suddenly, the air was filled with a deafening roar. The shadows in the room twisted and coalesced, forming a dark, writhing mass at the center of the chamber. The Devourer had awakened, its presence filling the room with a suffocating sense of dread. Dr. Hayes continued to chant, his voice rising above the roar. The protective circle glowed with a bright, white light, holding the entity at bay. But the Devourer was powerful, and it began to push against the barrier, testing its limits. Emma and Jake watched in horror as the dark mass shifted and swirled, taking on a vaguely humanoid shape. The entity's eyes glowed with a malevolent red light, and its mouth opened in a silent scream, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. Dr. Hayes handed Emma and Jake each a talisman, instructing them to focus their thoughts and will on the protective circle. They did as he said, their fear giving way to determination. They had to stand strong, or they would be consumed by the Devourer. The entity lashed out, its tendrils of darkness striking against the barrier. The protective circle flickered, but held. Dr. Hayes intensified his chanting, calling upon ancient powers to strengthen the shield. The Devourer let out a furious roar, its form expanding and contracting as it struggled against the barrier. The ground shook, and the air crackled with dark energy. Emma and Jake felt their resolve waver, but they held firm, focusing all their strength on the protective circle. The battle raged on, the entity's attacks growing more desperate. It seemed to sense that its time was running out. With a final, ear-piercing scream, it hurled itself at the barrier with all its might. The circle flared with blinding light, and the Devourer was thrown back, its form disintegrating into a swirling vortex of darkness. The room was filled with a deafening silence as the last remnants of the entity faded away. Dr. Hayes collapsed to the floor, exhausted but triumphant. Emma and Jake rushed to his side, helping him to his feet. "It's over," he said, his voice weak but resolute. "The Devourer is gone." They emerged from the chamber, feeling a profound sense of relief. The house seemed lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. The air was clear, and the oppressive atmosphere was gone. Over the next few days, Emma and Jake continued their cleansing rituals, determined to ensure that no remnants of the dark entity remained. They felt a newfound sense of hope, believing that they had finally rid their home of the malevolent presence that had haunted them. Dr. Hayes stayed with them for a while, helping to reinforce the protective barriers and offering guidance on how to maintain the house's purity. He advised them to remain vigilant, as the house's dark history meant that it could still attract other entities. As they worked together, Emma and Jake found their bond growing stronger. They had faced unimaginable horrors and emerged victorious. Their love and determination had carried them through, and they were determined to build a future free from the shadows of the past. One evening, as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset, Emma turned to Jake. "Do you think it's really over this time?" Jake took her hand, squeezing it gently. "I believe so. We've done everything we can. Now, it's up to us to make this house a home again." Emma nodded, feeling a sense of peace for the first time in months. They had faced their fears and defeated the darkness that had plagued their home. They were ready to move forward, stronger and more united than ever. The days passed, and the house remained peaceful. Emma and Jake resumed their normal lives, slowly but surely reclaiming their sense of security. They filled the house with light and laughter, creating new memories to overshadow the dark ones. But as they settled into their new routine, they remained ever watchful. The house had a long and troubled history, and they knew that other threats could still emerge. They continued to research and learn, arming themselves with knowledge and protective measures. One day, while cleaning out an old closet, Emma found another hidden compartment. Inside was a small, ornate box. She opened it to find a collection of letters and photographs, all dated from the early 1900s. The letters were addressed to Jonathan Thornfield, from a woman named Eleanor. As Emma read through the letters, she discovered a tragic love story. Eleanor had been Jonathan's secret lover, and their correspondence revealed a deep and passionate relationship. But as Jonathan's obsession with the occult grew, he had pushed Eleanor away, fearing for her safety. The last letter was the most heartbreaking. Eleanor had written to Jonathan, pleading with him to abandon his dark pursuits and return to her. She had loved him deeply but could no longer watch him descend into madness. She had planned to leave town, hoping that Jonathan would follow her. Emma felt a pang of sadness as she read Eleanor's words. She showed the letters to Jake, who shared her sense of sorrow. They decided to honor Eleanor's memory by planting a rose garden in the backyard, a symbol of love and hope amidst the darkness. As they tended to the garden, they felt a sense of closure. They had uncovered another piece of the house's history and had found a way to bring light to its darkest corners. The roses bloomed, filling the air with a sweet fragrance, a reminder that love could flourish even in the most unlikely places. Months passed, and life at Thornfield House continued to improve. Emma and Jake found joy in the simple things, like cooking dinner together, taking long walks in the forest, and spending evenings by the fireplace. They felt a deep sense of gratitude for each other and the life they were building. One night, as they sat on the porch, watching the stars, Emma turned to Jake. "We've been through so much. But I feel like we can face anything, as long as we're together." Jake smiled, wrapping his arm around her. "I feel the same way. We've faced our fears and come out stronger. This house is our home, and nothing can take that away from us." Emma leaned against him, feeling a sense of peace and contentment. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. Their love had carried them through, and they were ready to embrace whatever the future held. As they sat in the quiet of the night, the house stood as a testament to their strength and resilience. Thornfield House had a dark past, but Emma and Jake were determined to create a bright future. They had banished the unseen watcher and defeated the Devourer of Souls. They had turned a house of horrors into a home of hope and love. And so, they remained vigilant, always ready to face whatever darkness might come. But they did so with the knowledge that they had the strength to overcome anything, as long as they were together. The unseen watcher was gone, but their story was just beginning. In the heart of the house, the roses bloomed, a symbol of their enduring love and the light they had brought to Thornfield House. Emma and Jake stood together, united against the darkness, ready to face the future with hope and courage. In the weeks following their final confrontation with the darkness, Emma and Jake found themselves slowly adjusting to a life free from fear. The house that had once been a prison of terror was now a sanctuary of peace. They had faced unimaginable horrors and emerged stronger for it. But the memories of their ordeal lingered, and the scars ran deep. The first signs of true normalcy began to emerge in their daily routines. They resumed their hobbies, invited friends over, and even considered starting a family. The house felt different, lighter, warmer, and full of possibilities. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted, and in its place was a sense of hope. Emma spent her days tending to the garden, nurturing the roses that had become a symbol of their resilience. Each bloom was a reminder of their strength and the love that had seen them through the darkest of times. She found solace in the simple act of planting and watching life flourish. Jake, on the other hand, threw himself into renovating the house. He repaired the damage caused by their battles with the unseen entities, restoring the house to its former glory. The work was therapeutic, allowing him to reclaim the space and make it truly their own. Despite the calm, they remained vigilant. They knew that the house had a long and troubled history, and they couldn't afford to let their guard down completely. They continued to research the house's past, uncovering more about Jonathan Thornfield and the dark forces he had unleashed. One day, as they were cleaning out the basement, Emma found a hidden compartment behind an old bookshelf. Inside was a small, ornate box. She opened it to reveal a collection of letters and photographs, much like the ones she had found before. But these letters were addressed to someone named Eleanor. As Emma read through the letters, she discovered a tragic love story. Eleanor had been Jonathan's lover, and their relationship had been passionate and intense. But Jonathan's obsession with the occult had driven them apart. The letters detailed Eleanor's growing fear for Jonathan's safety and her attempts to save him from his dark pursuits. Emma felt a deep connection to Eleanor, recognizing the parallels between their stories. She showed the letters to Jake, and they both felt a renewed sense of purpose. They decided to honor Eleanor's memory by continuing to cleanse the house of its dark history. With Dr. Hayes' guidance, they performed another cleansing ritual, this time focusing on the basement and the hidden compartment. The air was thick with the scent of sage and other purifying herbs as they chanted the incantations. The energy in the room shifted, becoming lighter and more peaceful. As the ritual came to an end, Emma and Jake felt a sense of closure. They had not only defeated the dark entities that had plagued them but had also brought peace to the spirits trapped within the house. The oppressive atmosphere was gone, replaced by a warm, inviting energy. Dr. Hayes congratulated them on their efforts. "You've done an incredible job," he said. "Thornfield House is truly a place of light now. But remember, vigilance is key. Keep the protective barriers strong and continue to honor the spirits that once resided here." Emma and Jake nodded, grateful for his guidance. They knew that their journey was far from over, but they felt confident in their ability to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They had transformed a house of horrors into a home of hope, and they were determined to keep it that way. Months passed, and life at Thornfield House continued to improve. Emma and Jake grew closer, their bond strengthened by the trials they had endured. They made new friends in the community and became an integral part of the town. Their story of resilience and triumph inspired others, and the house became a symbol of hope for everyone who heard their tale. One evening, as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset, Emma turned to Jake. "We've come so far," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "I can't believe how much we've overcome." Jake smiled, wrapping his arm around her. "We've been through a lot, but we've done it together. And that's what matters." Emma nodded, feeling a sense of peace and contentment. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. Their love had carried them through, and they were ready to embrace whatever the future held. As they sat in the quiet of the night, the house stood as a testament to their strength and resilience. Thornfield House had a dark past, but Emma and Jake had transformed it into a beacon of light and hope. They had turned a house of horrors into a home filled with love and warmth. The roses in the garden bloomed, a symbol of their enduring love and the light they had brought to Thornfield House. Emma and Jake stood together, united against the darkness, ready to face the future with hope and courage. In the heart of the house, the lingering shadows were gone, replaced by the warm glow of their love and determination. Emma and Jake knew that they had conquered the darkness, but they remained ever watchful, ready to face whatever challenges might come their way. Their story was one of resilience and triumph, a testament to the power of love and the strength of the human spirit. Thornfield House was no longer a place of fear, but a sanctuary of hope, a home where light and love prevailed. Emma and Jake had created a legacy, ensuring that the darkness would never return. As they looked out over the garden, the stars shining brightly above, they felt a deep sense of fulfillment. They had faced their fears, defeated the darkness, and emerged stronger for it. Thornfield House was their home, and they were ready to face whatever the future held.